We're very fortunate tonight to talk to Edmund McMillen. He is a member of Team Meat as well. He's been a longtime game developer, a longtime Newgrounds member, and contributor. He's produced some incredibly classic games. There's Gish, Time, well, I never actually heard it pronounced. I'm going to assume the typo leads to the same way to say it, but Time Clock, yeah. Coil, Super Meat Boy, and most recently The Binding of Isaac. He's made a lot of great games, and I know we're pretty excited to have him here and to ask him some questions. So thanks for taking the time, Edmund.
No problem at all.
Maybe to start off, because this is a club about getting involved in game development and game design, can you talk about your humble beginnings, or if they were humble, what got you started in developing games?
Games didn't come for a while. I actually got started just in the independent mindset when I actually had one of the reasons why I'm doing this today. I had a guest speaker come into one of my schools when I was a freshman in high school, and he was an independent artist, and he had like a comic and like a syndicated comic that he independently did, and then he had like a show on public access, and then he also had like an animation that he did that it was entered in the Sick and Twisted Festival of Animation. And he came and talked to the class just about what it was to be an independent artist, and it was just the most awesome thing I'd ever heard of, and I didn't even realize that was an option. And I knew like from that moment that that's what I wanted to be. Like I didn't know exactly how I was going to be able to make a living, or exactly what it was artistically that I would be able to do independently that would keep me going. But I knew that I just wanted that. I wanted the ability to do whatever I wanted to do, and just not have to, worry about having a boss and whatever else. So I actually started out doing comics, kind of emulating this guy. And comics kind of turned into like online comics and interactive Flash stuff. And then that kind of morphed me into this very budding independent scene, this online independent scene, which was like Newgrounds and a bunch of Flash games and stuff like that. And that's kind of where it all started. I didn't even realize I was making games. I thought I was just making little fun interactive toys. And that's kind of what I was doing. But I was associating myself with a lot of people who were making independent games like Tom Fulp. And I ended up starting to make games with those people. And then I just happened to live down the street from an independent company called Chronic Logic, which had made a game that I had played called Bridge Builder. And I was looking for work, and I volunteered my time there, and they hired me on as like a graphic artist. And as time passed, I basically came up with this pitch for Gish, and I pitched it to him, and that kind of like solidified me being, being in independent games. I got into the IGF, and it won the grand prize, and it was kind of like, oh wow, like there's actual, you can make a living doing this. And back then it was barely a living, but it was definitely really awesome. It was just inspiring and really fun to see so many creative people, and I knew from that moment on that this was something that I was just going to put all my time and effort into for the next 9 years. And 9 years later, I made a game that actually made money. So.
It's interesting to see, because you seem a lot different than a lot of the other indie devs that have made it famous. For example, you still run your own store, and you do limited edition publications and limited edition toys and various things, which, in contrast to something like Minecraft, which is now in some of the bigger stores, they hire people out to make their shirts and stuff. It really does seem like a labor of love. Like you still have those comic roots and those indie roots.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's just growing up in the 90s. Like I was lucky enough to grow up in a time where it was really cool to have the freedom to do that sort of stuff. Like I grew up with very indie friendly things. Like that was back when MTV had Liquid Television, and you could basically submit, animations and get them on television and stuff like that. And just a lot of really odd, very artistic, very inspired stuff in the 90s. It was just this blast of awesomeness, and it still just stuck with me. And I think people appreciate the hands-on intimacy of doing something, and like Like when I made The Binding of Isaac, I also collected all of the sketches that I did for the game and made a little zine, which I used to make back in the 90s. Made a zine of like a zero art zine of all the sketches with a bunch of like design docs, and then I did like a silkscreen cover, and I printed 131 of those because there's 131 items in the game, and I sold those out of the store, and they're like signed limited edition, and I'm not going to make any more of them. It just seems special, and I really like that sort of stuff, so I continue to do it, and I think it's just my personal preference, and that's why. My wife's the same way. She does one of a kind, kind of like plush toys and stuff like that, and doesn't mass produce anything. It's fun to do, and it's fun to make something really special and limited. So.
Right. Yeah, it's refreshing to see because you don't always see that kind of thing. Maybe you can talk a little bit about you mentioned your history and how you got into games and the transitions you made. That was at a different time. I know when Newgrounds was converted to an actual games portal and started accepting Flash games, that was relatively early in the internet. We still had the little animated for the construction guys floating around on every web page. But it's a really different environment now where someone can just download Flash Develop or tools that will easily allow them to write games or get involved in this community. Do you see a lot of differences now, or do you think the barrier to entry has changed?
Yeah, I mean it's night and day now in good and bad ways. Like initially, when the internet really started getting creative in like '99 to 2001, there was a lot of really creative people doing a lot of really cool stuff, and that was back when you could actually make money off of ads and stuff like that. And basically, when the market crashed, it seemed like everything just kind of got watered down and corporate, and everybody started just kind of doing the same stuff. But now it kind of is peaking back up again because, like you mentioned, like things are pretty accessible. Like almost anybody could pick up Game Maker and make a really crude game in a few days without really knowing much about anything. There's a lot of tools and forums and tutorials about Flash and to make it as easy as possible for you to pick up and make games. And in that respect, it's really great. Like back when I started doing games, or whatever you want to call them, my first few Flash games, I think my first 15 Flash games possibly, I didn't make a dime from them. I was just doing them for fun. And a few years after that, they started doing sponsorships, which just kind of came out of the woodwork, where like basically different companies would sponsor your game, and they would give you X amount of money to advertise for their website and put it on their website. And that was actually how I was able to support myself for many, many years. I mean, that's even grown even bigger now. There's places like Adult Swim that'll actually buy your IP for like 40 grand, which is a sizable amount of money for somebody, you know, who's starting out. And that's one of the ways that a lot of really prominent indie game designers are actually keeping afloat is because of these kind of options. So yeah, it's definitely promising. It's booming right now. It's pretty huge. The independent scene is basically anybody could pick up, make a game, and probably make an okay living off of it if they really put their all into what they're doing and really try their best to make something new and original.
Yeah, we talked to a guy who was a university student when he was doing this part-time, and he paid his whole tuition that way, so it's a very different market.
Oh yeah.
Pretty easy and accessible now. Now you did some programming, but you're not primarily a programmer.
Programming is just not for me at all. And luckily, I was able to work with enough people that I didn't ever need to be. It's just not, my mind doesn't work that way at all, and since it's not interesting, I don't have enough motivation to actually learn how to do it. You know, I'm primarily, my roots are in illustration, and then I pushed into design, and those are my strengths. So, and I never want to work alone, so I prefer to just stick to design and art.
That's a side that we haven't really heard from speakers here, and it's different because, at least for me, I tend to think of the indie developer who's making it mostly as a solo, just being a programmer and doing everything themselves. But you have to come into it with a fully fledged or mostly fully fledged design. How is that different, especially considering that that's how you're making your income for a while? Like, at what point do you bring on a programmer, and how much do you have to have fleshed out before you go with it?
What's interesting is I never really thought about this much until just recently, and somebody asked about this exact same question, and I was like, oh, I never even thought about it that way. Like, I guess I guess the way I work is a lot different than other people because programmers have the ability to prototype their ideas right away and they can see the value like pretty quickly. And with me, I actually just have to, you know, brainstorm on paper and really try to visualize how things are going to work to the best of my ability. It's kind of a guessing game, but I tend to focus my design skills towards, you know, stuff that I'm already familiar with and understand formula-wise. And also I put a lot of effort into the themes and the overall, you know, the visual themes, the gameplay themes, and how everything kind of intertwines together story-wise, I guess you could say. So most of my design falls into that category, and I'm able to do that on paper and kind of see like how and if whatever I'm thinking up might be, you know, worthwhile. And mostly I go by not necessarily of how well I think it'll work, but more how inspired I am by the idea. Like with Isaac, I had a very rough idea of like, I just had this like epiphany of how easy it would be to turn the Zelda dungeon structure into a roguelike. And that was basically it. And I thought, okay, well, I wouldn't want to do a traditional Zelda melee combat, so I probably want to do a shooter because that really hasn't been done roguelike-wise. And then I just had those basic ideas on paper, and then I'm able to just, it's pretty much like almost a math formula where I can kind of see like probabilities of things, and with roguelikes, you've got a pretty good foundation already there for you to like plunder. And I just kind of rolled with it, and then when I see on paper that, wow, I'm really excited about this, you know, it's keeping me up at night, I really want to work on it, I'm starting to sketch out different characters and stuff like that. Once I feel that motivation, then I'll, you know, tell one of my programmer friends or whatever, hey, who's up for a game? And at the time it was Florian, who I'd made games with in the past. We hadn't made a game in a while, and Tommy was on vacation, so it was going to be a prototype. It was going to be a little game jam game. I didn't know if it was going to work or not, but after a few weeks of working on it, it turned into a really big project, and I just kind of rolled with it. And that's kind of how it works. And it's not, they don't all work though. Like I've started many projects where I've put months of work. I've actually worked on 2 projects for a year each, and nothing came from it. So there's always the risk of that. Losing inspiration, or the idea just not being as good as you thought, or mostly losing inspiration. But it happens. I mean, it'll happen to anybody. You just kind of got to know when to like put it down when it's just not happening anymore, and move on to something else, or reinvent your way to like find motivation to continue. But yeah, I mean, that's basically how it works. Come up with a basic idea, and if you're really feeling it, like if you really feel like it has promise and you feel motivated to work on it, that's most important, is your own personal motivation of like, how do I really believe in this? Does this really feel really awesome? Then take it to the next level and start investing time into it. That's basically how I've worked with almost all my games.
So a question about that then. There's a common thought in the commercial game development studios that when, for example, QA goes in and tests a game, they get sick of it because they're playing the same thing over and over again. And I think I read a quote from you where you said you were getting to 100% in Super Meat Boy every 8 days or so in your testing of the games. Is the majority of your time late in the cycles just playing the game and identifying those flaws?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, especially for Meat Boy. Like for Meat Boy, when we're going through like VMC testing, there's not much I can do since I don't program. I can't fix bugs. I can identify bugs. I can play test and identify bugs, and tune levels and everything else like that. But for me, there isn't much I can do other than just play the hell out of it. And for Meat Boy, it was actually, I was playing it every day for 8 days straight, where every day I had to 100% the game. And that was fucking hellish. It was unimaginably stressful. I got pretty good at it though, and I also made a lot of the game easier, because there were certain parts where there were, like the kids level was actually harder than it actually turned out to be. So I made it easier because I had such a hard time playing it, because I needed 100% the game, so I had to make it easier.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, with any game, you got to play test the hell out of it. I'm actually kind of surprised. This is another thing that came up recently, where I was really surprised that not all game designers complete their games. It seems profoundly wrong. But there are a lot of designers out there who just concede that theoretically the game can be beaten and don't necessarily beat it themselves. And I kind of against that, because I think you not only need to test the hell out of what you're doing, but it seems a little unfair to make something that you can't beat yourself. But yeah, it's all about playtesting. You not only do you find bugs, but you also teach yourself how you can make it better, like by playing it, and kind of get into that creative mindset of how the player can kind of see it. It also really helps to watch other people play it. And when I mean watch other people play it, I mean just watch them and say nothing at all, because you need to let them make mistakes and see where your flaws are, because that's definitely something I've been working on over the past couple of years, especially with Meat Boy, where it's really hard to put yourself in the mindset of how another person might play your game. And when you're making a game and you're trying to make accessible as possible, because you want a lot of people to play it, but you don't want to compromise your own integrity, you really got to be really open your mind as much as you can of like, how does the general person play this game and how do they see things? Because they don't see things the way you see them. And the only way to do that is to actually just sit behind somebody and watch them play. And the more people, the better. But as far as Q&A and stuff goes, I don't even know how well that stuff helps. Like, we had some Q&A people for Super Meat Boy, and they had the just stupidest ideas. It's just like, a lot of those people they just want to be game designers. So what they'll do is, instead of actually giving you reliable feedback, which is stuff like, I got stuck here or whatever else, they'll actually give you creative feedback where they want to have their say in some design element of the game. And that sometimes really hurts things. So it's better to just have your average person playing the game and you watching and them not really telling you anything. Just watch them play. Their input doesn't matter. You need to just see the mistakes that they're making, and you can clearly see what needs to be fixed. But yeah.
Yeah. So you played Meat Boy to 100%. Is that, considering that you added roguelike elements to Binding of Isaac, is that even remotely possible, or how much of the time do you think you spent playtesting that? Or
well, like I said, my wife 100% of the game, so she was actually the #1 playtester, which was pretty cool. It was the first game where it was the first game I'd ever designed that grabbed her and like totally sucked her in, and she was really into it. And I was really surprised, because the first time she played it, she thought it was way too hard for her, and but she kept picking it back up again. So she was like my #1 playtester, and actually 100%ed it before I did, because I had all these increasingly different builds as I'm going, and she ended up putting like 130 hours into the game. But with Isaac, yes, like testing is very hard. I of course did end up 100%ing the game before it came out, but there were elements like when you've got 131 items and they stack, there's no way for you to know combinations of 3 and 4 items and what they might actually do to the game. And sometimes those bugs, I guess, in quotes, can be happy accidents and actually do cool things. And we had like kind of rough perimeters for, like, certain items would modify shots. Like, there's an item that makes your tears come back to you, and this applied to all your tears. So there were certain combinations where, like, if you had a bomb that you threw out, it actually might boomerang back to you, which was a mistake, but it actually was pretty cool, and a lot of those elements actually stayed in. And there was like a thing where if you happen to get 2 items together, it was like the third eye and then the wiggly eye, which like wiggled all your tears together. It would actually make these cluster shots where it was like a shotgun blast where they were all like tight together. And I thought that was really awesome. And there was just a lot of happy accidents like that. But there were also bad ones where like certain items, I think like chocolate milk and the knife, combined together to make like the most powerful weapon in the game. And this was all an accident. And it'll actually like kill most bosses in 2 or 3 hits. And certain stuff like that we have to actually go in and fix. And there's really no way possible that we can see those bugs before other people. So we kind of just put it out there, and when people find the bug, then we fix it. And it's with a roguelike structure, you kind of just gotta be okay with patching, because it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen with every game, honestly. You're gonna there's no way to find all the bugs. You're gonna definitely have to go and patch stuff.
Can I ask you about your game development process. From the inception of the idea to the end, do you follow, you have a bit of a slow start and then you ramp up and then you go to crunch at the end? Is it similar to that, or what does your crunch time look like? There's been a lot talked about the Super Meat Boy crunch time, which is pretty hard on you guys. But
Yeah.
to any projects?
See, I've been through lots of crunch times. Like, usually crunch time happens when you have any kind of artificial deadline of whatever. Usually it's the IGF. Like, in the past, it was like, I've crunched for almost every IGF that I've entered. I think I've entered the IGF 7 times. And the crunch is basically, a stressful month of working till, the next day and then going home, sleeping for a few hours and coming back. It's kind of a part of life when you're independent because, you got to get shit done in order to finish. And sometimes, you get a little relaxed and you don't do as much work and you've got to make up for it another day, and that's usually when you crunch. Meat Boy Crunch was a horrible, horrible mess, which shouldn't have happened, and it was totally artificial. We had 4 months to finish what we were starting, and it was kind of going to get through all the testing process and everything else like that. And we had 4 months to finish, and then basically Microsoft said, we're doing this promotion. If you want to get in it, you need to finish the game in 2 months. So we had to crunch 4 months of crunch, which was already a lot of work, into less than 2 months. And we had to not only do that, but we had to also pass the first time, which was almost unheard of when it comes to VMC testing. And that just turned into the most gruelingly horrible, stressful situation of my life, and even more so for Tommy, who actually had more work because he's the programmer. And I wouldn't recommend it. And hopefully no one will ever have to go through that sort of stuff again. It was a very isolated incident, and I don't think many people will have to worry about that much stress being pushed on them. But crunch is a part of development, and usually it starts out, programmer gets the engine there, unless you're using another program, another engine. And then, the design process, for me at least, I keep it very open-ended. I like to improvise as much as I can. So I don't have... I have a lot of themes that I'm very strict to, but I keep the gameplay open, like I said, so when something happens and it's a happy accident, I can just guide it to where I want it to be, and it becomes a part of the game. And that's kind of the fun in game design. It's the game aspect of game design. Like, designing a game is a lot like playing a game. You discover new elements and you get to experiment with them and you learn as you go. And that's what making a game is really, that's why it's fun. And so I keep that as open as possible so I can just kind of improvise as I go. And then once everything is in place and we just need to get shit done, then you crunch and just work as hard as you can to like hit a deadline that you set for yourself, a release date. Usually that deadline is, this is when I run out of money. That seems to be the usual deadline. And you just crunch and you get it done, and then you probably patch for the next 2 months and do press.
Yeah, the support is always one of the things you forget about early on in the project, how long that takes. I have one more question, then I want to open it up to people in the room. Sorry, I've stolen all the time so far. Edmund, can you talk a little bit about the difference between a sequel and an expansion pack? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you're a fan of the idea of game 2 in a series. But
I'm not a fan. Okay, I'm not a fan of a sequels if the sequel doesn't do something better or new than the first one. So like the Zelda games, their sequels are always really different, and they usually have like a new mechanic that really changes everything. Like, even though like Link to the Past and like they're all dramatically different, even though they have the same basic, dungeon structure and combat and whatever else. And those are always usually okay. And even the Mario games are pretty okay, though they've gotten a little watered down as they've gone. But games like Mario Kart, Mario Party, Tony Hawk, Tomb Raider, it would have been nice if those games just stayed 1 or 2 games and then they stopped, because what they did is they kind of tainted our memory. So like, maybe the last Tomb Raider, like the first, I don't know if you guys remember, but the first Tomb Raider was really fucking good. Like, really, really good. It was groundbreakingly awesome. The last many Tomb Raiders are kind of crappy. And that's the last memory you have of this, beautiful game that you once loved so much. And it kind of sucks when it gets tainted like that. And it's kind of inevitable unless you've got a really new, awesome idea, or if you just didn't do it right the first time. One sec.
Okay.
Yeah, for me with sequels like with Meat Boy, the reason why I don't want to do a sequel is because I know for a fact that I can't make a better game than that when it comes to Meat Boy. Like, if there's just no way. Like, maybe in 10 years I'll come up with this amazing new idea once I've learned more and I've gotten better. That will just be groundbreakingly awesome, and I'll feel so inspired to work on a sequel. But the chances are that's not going to happen. So I'd like to just keep it as its own thing. Like, I've got plenty new ideas, and I'm not, a one-dimensional designer, and I want to design different things. So I'd like to just do different projects. Now with Isaac, the Binding of Isaac the development cycle was only 3 months, and there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to do in it that I didn't get to do, and I actually put a lot of that in a free expansion, the Halloween expansion, and then after some time passed, and I realized that like a lot of people like this, and then like I sincerely had no idea that anybody would like this game. Like, I thought this would be the most. Oh, we got a baby crying out there. We got the most that it would be like. I thought it would be like a midnight movie of video games, like something a few people would really like. I had no idea a lot of people would like it, and when so many people started playing it, it inspired me. Like, it inspired me to want to make more game for people to play because so many people seemed to love it so much, and I loved it so much, and again, my wife did. My wife 100% did it, and a lot of the part of me was like, I enjoyed that so much, I would really love to continue, and I wonder if I can, and I basically came up with quite a few really big changes to the game that could expand it. I didn't want to make a sequel because it was essentially the same game, so I thought I would just do a paid expansion. So I'm going to put in 3 more months of work, and probably 50% more content for the original game. It changes a lot of the gameplay, and I'll put it up for $3. And I'm cool with expansions, like usually unpaid expansions, but in this case, I didn't want to not get paid for another 3 months of work.
Right. People have questions? Maybe a few questions earlier. Yeah.
How exactly is it like being the artist and getting everything ready for the programmers? I don't know how that works, but how is it for you?
Man, that's a hard thing to answer because this is just how it's been. This is how it always has been. For me, I mean, it's since I'm also the designer, I'm usually designing and drawing and designing around my own ideas. So I'm just a self-motivated person. And it usually, in the games that I've worked on, the programmer will make an engine, a basic engine, so I can make levels with it. And then I'll implement my own art into the engine and then start making levels with it. And then they tweak, the game as it goes, and they implement new features and new mechanics as we progress. And I wish I had more to say about this, but it's just so normal to me that it's hard for me to talk about it. It's like I just draw stuff, it goes in the engine, and I use it. It's what I do, so it doesn't really seem. It's hard for me to really talk about, I guess.
No, that's perfect. Short and sweet. Thank you.
Other questions for Edward? You just beat it to the punch. Yeah.
You were an early adopter of indie bundles, and I'm wondering how your experience has been with the sort of rise of indie bundles as a way of promoting and cross-promoting indie games.
Yeah, I've definitely got at this point, a love-hate relationship with bundles. I love the fact that these bundles made a lot of developers who really needed the money, a lot of money, and the ability to make more games. It's really cool that, so many people got to play these games. But I do believe that in the end... Sorry.
I'm sorry, you guys.
I do believe that in the end, bundles will actually hurt. I think I really think that it's gonna bite us in the ass in a few years because I think a lot of people are going to expect lower prices for indie games, and or just not buy games that are released that are new that they're not sure because they assume that they're going to get bundled. And there's just so many fucking bundles. There are just too many bundles, too many games, too much confusion, and I can tell you from experience from being in bundles that it's going downhill fast. Even the biggest bundles are making less and less. So, yeah, it's just one of those snowball things that's just gonna get bigger and bigger, and then it's just gonna hit a wall and end up toppling some stuff over for sure. But the good thing is it actually doesn't affect sales on Steam. And what I've actually noticed statistically, sales go up. It's like it stimulates the market, I guess. I don't even know if I'm using that term right, but that's what it seems to do. Like, our sales actually go up when our games are in bundles, and it's just kind of like, it kind of goes back to my theory of how piracy isn't really that much of a negative effect, because it stimulates, people playing the game, and if people are playing the game, then their friends are seeing them play the game, and if the game is good, those people's friends are going to go out and buy the game, not knowing where they got the game from. It's the same thing with piracy, the same thing with bundles. So we have noticed that it has actually helped sales to almost give our games away for free. So who knows? I mean, I have no idea, but I have a feeling that something bad is going to happen from these bundles. But till then, everybody's just going to use it all up until it's gone. It's going to keep going.
When you work with programmers, how much of a say do they get in the design process? Do they get are they able to tweak any mechanics, or are you do the art and then the design, and then the programmers just take your vision and just create it and make it work?
When I work with somebody else, programmer wise, I don't, even though I'm a bit of a control freak, I'll admit that I need to feel like I'm in pretty much control of the situation design-wise in order for me to feel motivated enough to work on it. And that's been a problem in the past. But when it comes to working with somebody else, like, I need and want feedback. Like, I need somebody else to validate either what I'm saying or tell me this doesn't feel right or whatever else. And it really helps, like, with Tommy. There was a lot of technical design that he just did all himself. Like, the game's control, like, stuff that he would have more control over. Like, he would have direct control over the game's controls because he's the one programming it, so he's the one that did all the controls. So that's something that I had nothing to do with, that was really, really well done, that he knew exactly how to do, because he had a very good feel for how things should be, and he had complete control over the programming aspect of it. So in those respects, like, there are certain things that a designer person or myself will have weaknesses in design-wise that hopefully the programmer has better strengths in. And that can vary in many different ways. But yeah, for me, I usually like to have a lot of control. I always do the game design, the level design. Like, I've done level design for all the games I've worked on. The basic design of the game is usually a basic vision of mine. But when it comes to the flow of the game and the process, it's not like I just try to hog everything, and if somebody else has a good idea, that they don't get the input. You definitely want that feedback back and forth. That's why the other person's there. You want to be able to give and take. There is definitely an art to it, because you don't want to step on toes, because that's happened in the past too.
Right.
It's different for each person. You just got to get a feel for it, and just try to be as possible with it.
Tommy, I'm just going to make a quick change here. I think I broke the microphone again. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Having bad luck with this thing. Let's try it. Okay. I won't touch any more buttons here. Sorry. More questions? Someone has another question? Yeah.
When creating like a visual theme for like Super Meat Boy or like Binding, you have a really like distinctive style. Does that come like all at once, or do you like build it really slowly?
Usually, I get bored really easily, and especially with the styles and games and stuff like that. And I try my best to come up with a different style for each game that I'm working on. And like Binding of Isaac and Meat Boy may look similar to a lot of people, but to me they're very, very different styles. And that's how I kept my interest up when it comes to the visuals and stuff like that. And as far as coming up with it, I usually just like, hey, what haven't I done? Have I done like thick lines and bubbly characters with more of like a Photoshop looking background, more of like a painterly background? Have I done that before? If I haven't, let's do that. Like I usually just try to do a different style each time and just try to find a style that feels unique. And my goal with everything is to make sure that what I'm working on someone won't see it and be like, that looks just like something else. It's usually a good rule of thumb too, because you kind of want to, when making independent games, you need to stand out as much as you can. So in every way, you should try to be making your game unique. Theme, even the colors that you're using, the style, art, the music, the sound, the story, the gameplay. The more unique, the better. The more it'll stand out, and a sea of shitloads of games. Stay away from space-themed, asteroid-type games because those have been done. Stay away from zombies; those have been done.
Yeah.
With Binding of Isaac not being by Team Meat, does that mean Team Meat was a one-game kind of group, or are there going to be more collaborations in the future?
Binding of Isaac could have honestly very easily been a Team Meat game, but since Tommy just wasn't around at the time I started prototyping it, like he was going to program it, but then he went to Hawaii, and I was like, I need a vacation too, so I'm going to make a game. And, and that's basically what it was. Like, and Tommy definitely regrets not being the programmer for it because he really loves the game too. No, Tommy's like my best friend, and we talk every day. And we are currently working on 2 games for the future, and one of them will probably be for like a handheld touchscreen sort of game. And the other one will be a much larger game, which will probably take a few years to make. And who knows what else will come out of the woodwork. But we're definitely always going to be working together, I think. It's just the perfect person to work with. Like, he's like my best friend, and we just work together so well, and we complement each other very well. So I don't see me not really working with him at all in the future. He's a fun guy to work with. That's also an important thing to look for, too, when you're collaborating with somebody, is how well you get along. And if you just have a fun time with that person, if you can kind of push that into the game. Like, one of the reasons why Meat Boy's humor, and I guess you could say it's kind of dark playfulness, that's all really there because it was all like inside jokes that me and Tommy were making back and forth. Like, a lot of stuff just seems weird and doesn't make sense to most people, but it was a total inside joke with us. Like, we're referencing a bunch of these weird different things, and the game was kind of an expression of us growing up with video games. Like, it was a video game about growing up playing video games, and you just kind of look for that. Like, when you're working with somebody, you look for the strengths and weaknesses of what you do together, and then you try to make a game that complements those things. And Meat Boy, I think, really complemented those things, and I think that's one of the reasons why the game did so well, because we really liked working together, and we put that in the game. Like, we put the joy of just working with a friend, into the game, and I think it kind of shows.
Speaking of working with people, do you have any advice for programmers who are also designers that might be looking for artists to collaborate with?
Yeah, I do. Don't necessarily just go out there and try to find the best artist. Number one thing to look out for when you're working with anybody is try to find somebody who's very motivated and inspired. That's number one. Because when you're starting out a new game, and you're trying to find somebody to work on it with you, chances are they're going to lose interest, especially if you're not paying them. They're just going to lose interest in it. So regardless of the skill set, I'm honestly not the best artist. I could get a lot better, and I really wish I was a better artist. My art gets the job done. I don't think it's that great. And you don't really need great art in order to make a good game. If you find somebody, if you can't draw at all, and you're just completely artistically, it's just not happening at all, just find somebody who seems really motivated that you can work really well with that gets the job done. Because what's going to matter is the game's design. That's all that's really going to matter. If the game is really well designed, the art doesn't matter at all. I mean, look at like what was that? Deepak Fights Robots, or any of the Tom Sennett games like Run Man. Those are the most crude MS Paint, looking games there are, and he actually rolls with it. Like, that becomes one of the quirky aspects of the game's design, is how bad the art actually is. And I'm sure he just threw that art out there, but it worked so well with the game, and the gameplay just stood by itself. You don't really need a great programmer, nor do you need a great artist. Like, just make something unique that's well designed and have fun with it, and you're totally golden. You can get a lot done with very little. It's pretty surprising. But yeah, just look for somebody who's very motivated that you can work well with. That's number one. You'll probably be good to go.
I don't really know exactly how to ask this, but I remember you were participating in the indie movie for indie games, aren't you?
Yeah.
As far as being interviewed. And I watched your short segments and how you talked about more or less your childhood. And how do you think that affects the now? I don't really know how to ask that, but just all that you went through then and do now with games, or just in general.
Like how did my upbringing and how I was when I was little affect what I do now? Is that the question?
Yes. Sorry if it's a little too personal.
No, it's fine. I'm an open book. It's when you volunteer your time for a movie, you kind of I'm open. You can ask me anything, so it's fine. Growing up the way I grew up and being a creative, isolated kid, I've been able to take a lot of those, and which everybody should. Like, you take the pieces of you that you know so well that aren't necessarily the best aspects of your personality, just put them into the games that you're working on. You don't even have to do it consciously. Most independent game designers don't do this consciously at all. They do it subconsciously. Aspects of who they are, their personal hang-ups, anxiety, and whatever else just bleeds into the game. There's no way to stop it, because video games are artistic expression, and you can't stop this from happening. But it's good to be semi-conscious about what you're doing, and try to write about your own personal experiences in games. And this is hard to explain, but it's more or less like, it's really hard. Like, I'm not a writer. I can't write fiction. Everything that I've written game-wise, and when I say writing, I don't mean traditional writing. I mean writing a game, like designing a game. Everything that I've written is fiction, and everybody's going to see it as fiction. But to me, the core aspects of all the things that I'm talking about are personal things that I've experienced in some way, shape, or form. And it's important to recognize that, to write abstractly about these experiences, because it comes off very honest and unique. And it's hard to convey exactly how that works, but it does. And it's really good to be motivated by your own personal hang-ups, just who you are. Like, talk about who you are. That's what's interesting. Like, everybody's played games about space marines killing each other. Like, I want to play games about things and people that I have never experienced. Like, in a lot of ways, The Binding of Isaac was about a million different things, but the core foundation of its theme had a lot to do with being an isolated, creative child who had very religious parents. And there was a lot of dogma flying around. And, like, growing up, if I played D&D or if I played Magic, half of my family considered me to be evil. And this is kind of what I'm pulling from. And that's why I think a lot of the game seems unique, is because I'm talking about something very specific and unique about stuff that I've experienced. And that's how I'm able to genuinely write about something instead of I'm not making it up. It's not fiction about I'm an assassin that drives cars. I'm not an assassin who drives cars. I don't know anything about that. I could never write about any of that sort of stuff. But I sure as hell can write about being an isolated child. So that's usually what I end up doing. But everybody's different, and I think everybody has their own little personal things that make them who they are, that they can write about and put into their games, that makes their games have a theme that stands out and makes it very honest and unique. I hope that made sense.
No, it did. Thank you.
I've got a few more. If you've got a bit more time, I'm in.
I got all the time.
Oh, wonderful. I got a big page of questions here. This has been a real treat. So I have a question. Maybe this is kind of silly, but I used to live in Silicon Valley down in San Francisco, and I know you're down in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Do you have basements down there?
Basements?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, we didn't have any basements in San Francisco area too.
No, I don't know why. I have no idea why. We have attics.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that in retrospect, thinking where you live, and I'm like, oh wait, there were no basements down there. But Isaac jumps into basements. So I'm glad you know about basements. That was that's a good question. I just had to ask about that.
Yeah, actually, wait. I did have one basement. My aunt had a basement, which was very creepy, and that's probably where a lot of the basement stuff came from. Like, it's pretty funny too. My aunt. So my mom's side of the family, they're very Catholic, and they all came from Mexico. So it's like Mexican Catholic. It's pretty specific if anybody knows what I'm talking about. But there's statues of the Virgin Mary in the yard and whatever else, and like there was a statue, some religious statue that was in her basement that you could see from a window, and it looked like an old lady just staring at you from like the bottom window. And me and my cousins were always really like scared of the basement, because it was so creepy. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the game, because there's a lot of religious things when you're little are quite creepy, and to have that religious thing in the basement probably had some impact on me, and probably I reflected that somehow in the game, I guess. But yeah, basements.
Yeah. Better not to have one now then.
Yeah.
One thing that you talked about in relation to your recent games is that you don't like to give away the ending and say, oh, you figured out what my intent of the ending was. Moreover, it tends to be that you don't have a specific ending. You don't tell a story in the sense that a game is telling the story that you've decided to write for it. What do you think is important about that, and why is that important to you?
I think it's important because a lot of it dances around the idea of game design, actual game design being an art in itself, and not necessarily in the traditional sense of like, I'm building a world that has, rule sets, but more or less like I'm using gameplay and the game's actual gameplay theme, like the fact that Isaac is shooting his tears out to fight things that look very similar to Isaac, not specifically saying anything. Like, a lot of people say, oh, those are his brothers and sisters. A lot of people are saying, those are reflections of himself. And both of those things are correct. And I don't feel the need to define exactly which one is the correct answer, because there really isn't. And the reasons why is because it's more gamey. There's something about it. There's something about like putting something out there and letting people try to figure it out. Like, all games are kind of puzzles and they stimulate your mind. And I think having a creative story out there that's not told in a traditional way and mostly just gets little pieces of the puzzle as you play, kind of like everybody's brain is different and they're going to try to creatively piece together this puzzle and try to figure out what's going on here and what makes sense and whatever else. And a lot of different aspects of it trigger different things in their own personal lives. So they all have different ideas of what's going on. And to each of these people, it's correct. It is correct. Like, I have no definitive answer for what happens to Isaac at the end and why things are happening and whatever else. Like, even going in, I made sure that I didn't want to have, like, this definitive thing going on. One sec, sorry. Actually, Indie Game the Movie is trying to call me. But yeah, it's purposely not necessarily vague, but purposely puzzling, because that's what games are. Like, And of course, I like to abstractly speak about things. I like to, allude to things, and I like to put a lot of different, even with Meat Boy, like people are like, oh yeah, whatever, Meat Boy is a video game, but there's a reason why, Meat Boy doesn't have skin, and there's a reason why his girlfriend is made of bandages. There's a reason for that. I don't need to explain the reason for that, but it's there, and I think a lot of people subconsciously realize it's there because your brain can't stop but try to put things together that seem to connect. And I'm even speaking vaguely about this. Like I'm speaking indirectly about it because I haven't completely figured out what I'm doing yet, and that's kind of the fun in it. It seems really interesting to me. What I'm doing seems interesting and inspiring to me. That's why I'm doing it. And I'm sure I'll get better at it and figure out exactly what I'm doing as time passes. But I just think it's important for games, at least for me, to write that way. It's more fun.
That was one of the attributions that I've heard made to Lovecraft, actually, is one of the things that make his stories so scary is that he doesn't describe what the scary thing is. He just describes it very vaguely, which forces the reader to make it their own in that way. So you take from it very personalized experience.
Yeah, exactly. But there's one other thing too. One of the main things that I pull from for this sort of stuff is the first Legend of Zelda. The first Legend of Zelda is my favorite game for many different reasons. But one of the main reasons is because nothing was ever defined. Like it was so to me. The story of you got to save the princess or whatever else. But the discovery of all these different castles and all these different artifacts, nothing was overly explained in any way, and it became yours. It became the players because they are getting pushed into this world that has no definition, so they get to define things for themselves. They get to name the characters and try to piece together why this is happening and whatever else. And there's a magic to that. There's this undefined magic, and I think the magic relies on the player kind of not knowing what's going on because things aren't defined, so they have to creatively make it up themselves. And when you are creatively invested in something, it becomes more important to you. It becomes more alive and more intimate. So that's why I'd say that I think those things are important to me.
A question about indie games and how indie games are. Maybe I'm misinterpreting how they're moving in this direction, but I'd love to hear what you think about this. So there are some similarities between what's happening in the indie publishing world for writers. How now there is this market for publishers or for writers who are making these books to put them up of their own accord. They do as much work on it as they want to. They put it up online. And they sell it on something like Amazon, on the Kindle store.
Yeah. So
now that barrier has gone away, much in the same way that indie games had opened up and allowed people to do that. Now there's something that's different there, though, is that typically it's done through the central source, like the Amazon store or iTunes. Do you think that's going to happen with indie games? Do you think that people are going to have a source like Steam, or will it always be viable for someone to put up an indie game and a PayPal link and do it that way?
Yeah, this question comes up every few years, and then there's something that always just breaks it. Because I would have said a few years ago, I would have said, well, your best bet is to go through Steam, go through App Store or whatever else, and then Minecraft comes out.
Right.
It's no. The cool thing about indie games or about independent anything is there are no rules. There's nothing that defines anything, and you can really do whatever you want, however you want to do it. And Notch did it his way. He did it all himself through PayPal and fucking broke PayPal. And I think that's the best way to look at it. If what you're saying is something people want to hear, then they're going to buy it regardless on what it's on. It might be a little harder to get to those people if you're not on a service that's easily accessible, but it's not impossible in the slightest. Nothing is impossible when it comes to that sort of stuff. And you can cut out your own little niche and do it exactly the way you want to do it. And I think that's pretty fucking cool. One of the reasons why I'm here today is because I got rejected by a few publishing companies, comic-wise. And it was a huge blow. being rejected when I was like, I think I just got out of high school, and like I'm trying to get my comics in stores, and they're like telling me that it's just not going to happen because my stuff's too weird. The first thing, instead of like just giving up and saying fuck it, I said, all right, well, I'm going to take all my stuff online and just go from there. And that's kind of the way it works. Like, you define where you make the rules. You can sell whatever the hell you want, wherever you want. You don't have to answer to anybody. You don't have to get ESRB. You don't have to go through Xbox Live. You don't even have to charge for it if you don't want. You make your own rules, and that's one of the awesome freedoms of this. Yeah.
No, it's nice that things are so open now. And I think you mentioned you're gonna get back into comics to some degree and put them up for your store.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Like I just put up the zines, and those are all gone. And that was really fun to put together. And I'm thinking about it kind of touches on what I was talking about before. Like when I was younger, I always wanted to put all my comics into a compilation, and I was never able to do that because it wasn't an option financially or any other way, and I could never get somebody to pick up my stuff and publish it. But now I have an option. Like now you can actually self-publish. I could either put it on Kindle, like you're saying, like I could put all my comics on Kindle, which I probably will do. I could also you can very cheaply publish your own books, which I'll probably do as well. I would like to eventually do more comics, but right now, like, video games are just a little too fun. And also making comics, it means working alone, and working alone is a bit dangerous for me. I spent enough time as a kid being completely isolated from everybody else, and sometimes it's fun, and sometimes it's a bit dangerous. This is also something to look out for when you're in this field. If you're an independent anything, usually means you're alone, and isolation can be a bit depressing. So be careful.
So roughly how far ahead have you played your career? Do you have an idea? Are you games development for life? It doesn't sound like you maybe want to be that, but how far ahead do you know what you're going to do?
I don't know. I could stop tomorrow. Like I honestly, just go with whatever feels right. If it feels fun to do something completely different, then I'd do that. Like right now, I of course know that I want to finish the game that I'm working on with Tommy with, but after that, I don't know. I have no idea, but I have a feeling that it'll be more game stuff because that's what haunts me. Like that's what keeps me up at night. When I go to bed, I can't sleep because of the ideas and things that I want to do video game wise. So, unless something else starts haunting me at night, I think I'll be stuck in video games for quite a while.
Yeah. There are worse places to be stuck, so that's...
I'm not saying it's not at all a bad thing. But, yeah. At times, creativity can feel a bit like something haunting you, for sure.
Well, certainly fortunate for us that you'll be there for at least a little bit longer, hopefully a long time.
Never know.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions for? Yeah.
As far as the good goes, I think we get a good idea of game publishing on that. What about the more negative side, independent games and all that? Like just anything in general that's not necessarily good about that or hard.
Of development or of indie games?
Indie games.
Just indie games in general? Like what's the negatives of indie games?
I guess the development as well could be in there.
Well, there are of course a lot of big negatives for indie games. I mean, number one is that you're probably not going to make any money. That's something that you should make sure you know, because even though it looks like a gold mine, and even though the guy you're talking to made a successful game that made money, before that I wasn't making more than like $15,000-$20,000 a year. So if that doesn't seem appealing to you, it's probably not for you. It was very appealing to me. Like I was, even looking back, I can't believe that I'm so honored to have been able to support myself with my own work for that amount of time. Even though it was a small amount of money, I mean, you just get used to being poor, and being poor is not that bad at all. It's not. It's in a lot of ways it's pretty inspiring, but that's a definite thing. Like working independently, it's very risky financially, and you need to be able to value what you're doing more than the money that that you're hopefully eventually going to get from working, because it's just not going to be for you if your end game is I want to be a millionaire. Like, you're rolling the dice here, and it's also good to know that in order to become an expert at anything, you've got to do it for at least 10 years. So there's probably a good 8 to 10 years that you're going to have to work your ass off for very little in order to get exceptionally good at what you're doing. And it's good to keep that in mind too. Other negatives, like I said, like isolation, sitting in front of a computer for very long periods of time for the rest of your life are considered negatives to a lot of people. But I mean, that's probably a lot of people's lives right now, regardless. So it probably is not that big of a deal. It wasn't for me. That of course can affect health as well. You want to try to exercise and all that sort of stuff too when you're sitting all day long. Honestly, relationship-wise, it can be a stress. Like my wife stuck it out through Meat Boy development, and I know it was a very hard thing for her to do. It can be very stressful, honestly, because of like financial issues, and also because so much of your time is spent trying to finish these projects that you are obsessed with. That can damper the relationship a bit when you're just sitting in front of the computer all day working on something obsessively, and then when you're not working on it, you're thinking about it. Those are definite negatives. I'd say that those are the biggest. Of course, the positives are great. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't amazing. If I wasn't completely filled up by the adventure of making these awesome things. It's a really great time to be able to do it too, because this is such a new art form that everybody's experimenting and breaking new ground and doing these cool things. But there are, of course, the negatives, and a lot of those negatives are financial and social. You're bound to run into them, and they should be expected. And hopefully, in the end, you'll get the things that you wanted. But you need to be in it for the fight, and not for the outcome.
Okay. One last thing, actually. Let me say this. As you said, isolation is also something that happens once in a while, and as far as I think we can all relate with, not all people can exactly be outgoing. Some people are more. How do I say that? I'm sorry. But would you say outgoing would help, no matter what you're doing? Just being outgoing, and even though you've grown up isolated, you can have quite character when you finally get there, and that would help in your position. Get your game out there, I guess.
I'm sorry, I got some of that, but for some bizarre reason, the mic was trying to hear you, and then it kept turning up.
Yeah.
Would you say just, since some gamers tend to be more introverted, would you say even an outgoing personality could help in not just the development, but getting your game out there,
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, just like, I am an introverted person, yet I'm talking to you guys. I don't think everybody is this one-dimensional person who's just an introvert who just, I hate everybody just as much as everybody else hates everybody else. And I feel just as much anxiety as everybody else feels about everybody else. I don't like being around people, especially people I don't know, and all that good stuff. But I'm really excited about what I'm working on, because I love it. And if you are excited about what you're working on, which you probably are, just put that foot forward and try to talk about it. Try to show people why you love what you're doing, and let that motivate you to talk about your game and tell other people why you're excited about it and why they should be excited about it and all that sort of stuff too. That stuff helps immensely, because when you're independent, you're probably going to need to do press, and you're going to need to talk about your game, and don't think of it as a social, experience. Think of it more of you just talking to a friend about what you love. And if you love it, you're just going to be able to naturally talk about it. It's just going to just come right out, and you're going to be able to just let it rip. You know, you don't have to memorize anything. You're not going to have to talk to a, you know, group of people about stuff you don't know. Like, and it does help to be motivated in that way. Definitely. I wish there was some other trick, you know, something I could say that would help people who are have social anxiety or just want to isolate and to help motivate them to get out there and talk more about their stuff, because there's a lot of developers out there who I'd love to hear more from. Like Cactus, for example. He's a very soft-spoken person who does not like doing press, but I would kill to hear him talk about his games. But I mean, he gets by. Like he still gets by. Like his personality is still loud enough to speak for him. Like he doesn't have to go out of his way to like talk to people and whatever else. Like his identity is outgoing enough for him to define who he is and help push his games and his work. But yeah, being a little outgoing is definitely important. You can't just sit on your hands and hope and pray that whatever you're working on is going to get to the right people, and you're always going to feel motivated to do stuff. And I've worked with people that are stuck kind of in that mode, and they can't break out of it, and it kind of sucks. But you got to find something to help motivate you to be a bit more extroverted and when it comes to, you know, motivation and talking about your work, because if you don't appear to care about what you're doing, then you cannot expect anybody else in the world to care. So it's good to be able to show it. And I hope that answered your question.
Yes. Sorry, I am so bad asking them, but thank you.
No problem.
Okay, I have just one question. You mentioned that you enjoyed Zelda. What are some of the games that you really enjoyed, and are they more to do with the sort of artistic aspects, or more to do with the game design, gameplay sort of aspects?
I think they have to do with both, and I'm trying to think of like the ones that come to mind more recently, so I don't have to just talk about the ones that people already know. I'm probably gonna end up talking about them either way. Some of my favorite games are games like the early Zeldas. Basically all the Zeldas except for maybe the most recent two. Not a huge fan of those, but Katamari, Shadow of the Colossus, Eternal Darkness, Street Fighter, Doom. Like the things that are important to me in games is give me something that I haven't really experienced before in as many aspects as you can throw at me. Like I want to play something completely new with a new point of view, with new gameplay that's both fun, thought-provoking, and just a new experience overall. Like just make it unique. Make it not like everything that I see. Like Braid, World of Goo, you know, all these games are so unique. Like all the games I've mentioned are quite unique in their own respects. They're really nothing like anything else, and it comes to all aspects. There's also the technical design aspects. It's like I want something that explores fully what its design core is. Like with Braid, like you've got the time mechanic, and that's just not this one-dimensional. I rewind time, and that's how I beat all the levels. Like he fully explores every element of time throughout the game, and not only is the game's design about time, the game's design is about the story, about a guy who wants to go back to fix something that was broken, and it's like it all bleeds together, and the more cohesion there is in the game, the better, and the more like alive and rich the game feels. And all the games that I like usually have that, have these intertwining elements that just flesh out the game into this, you know, beautiful, perfect package. And that's kind of what I look for in my favorite games.
Cool. Thanks.
Any other questions for? Okay. You have a question?
I'm curious.
You gotta speak up.
I'm curious about what effect, if any, that Super Tofu Boy had on sales a year ago.
Yeah, I wish there was some way to tell you, but honestly, I don't know. It was a magical experience. Like, when I woke up, that was one of the most memorable things, like, development-wise in my whole career was waking up, going online, and somebody IMing me going, "Did you hear about PETA protesting Meat Boy?" And I'm like, what? Like, it seemed like at the time, like, there's nothing that could have happened that would have been better than that. Like, it was just the most cool thing ever to, like, have some organization like them protest your game. It just seems so bizarre because, you know, in reality, like, Meat Boy has absolutely nothing to do with meat. Like, he's just a skin boy, but I don't know, it was just so great, and I wish I knew what effect it had on sales. Like, there's no way to see, like, the sales, it happened, like, right when we launched, so how could we tell? Like, sales were really good that whole week. I'm sure it definitely got the word out, and then it was very fun to, of course, go back and forth with them. And then I'm sure that helped, too, like, being able to, like, go back and forth with them, and then not only, like, express our feelings via Twitter, but also express our feelings via the game. Like, they're able to use game design to express their feelings about how meat is murder, and we're able to go back in and actually add Tofu Boy to our game, but make him really malnourished. So really it was a really, really cool, very inspired, very fun thing that happened where we got to actually respond in a creative way. We both responded in creative ways about things that we felt passionately about. Like, it was cool. And that's what I remember the most. And I'm sure it helped get the word out for sure. Questions?
Okay. I have one more that I followed your Twitter stream for a while, and something came up a while back, and I've always kind of wanted to ask you. What was it like for you having the beards of Danny B and Notch in a single place at one time? Was that sort of intimidating, all those beards?
Oh, yeah.
I remember the picture. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I wish I had a funny response to that.
Sorry.
It would have been awesome. I could have just knocked that one out of the park. But
it was great.
Yeah, that was an awesome beard thing that happened.
I had to ask. Well, if there are no more questions, there was one final question that we'd like to ask everyone who we're fortunate enough to talk to. If you had, because the goal of our club is to help people get involved with games and game development, if you had a single message that you could tell to someone who was looking to do that but didn't really know where to start, what would that message be? What would you like to tell someone who's getting or wants to get into games?
I would tell them it's that once you find your voice, that it is the most awesome thing you can do right now. Like, it is the most inspiring, fun, rewarding in many different ways experience that, and that's one of the reasons why I talk when people ask. You know, it's one of the reasons why I volunteered, you know, a camera crew to live in my house for months and document me, because this is really fun. Like, it has a lot of negatives, but it is a very, very fun and inspiring and great thing. And I'm honored to be a part of game design in general. And I hope other people will get into it, because not only will they have a really great time, but I'll also get more games to play, you know, that have different points of views that are fun. And I want to play more games. And I know that there are people out there who can make really cool games. So it'd be awesome if everybody did it. And I would just say, start out really small. Start out really small. Find out what you have that other people don't. Find out what makes you unique and what makes your work unique, and what makes it important, and just try your best to express yourself through your work. Don't worry about all the bullshit technical stuff. Like, you don't need to be the best at anything. Just be honest, and it'll actually hold way more weight than anything else. Just be honest with what you're doing and have fun with it, and it'll show in your work. And just don't give up. It takes a long time to get good at stuff. You can't expect your first game to make any money. You can't expect your first game to be good. Your first game's not going to be good. It's going to be shitty. Everybody knows that. It's a stepping stone effect. Like, you've got to build on what you know. And as years go by, you'll get really good, and you'll be very proud of yourself, and you'll do great things and inspire other people, and just keep at it, and you'll do great. And I hope that was inspiring.
It It was beautiful. It was beautiful. Thanks again for your time, Evan. This has been a great talk. I know everyone here was really excited to get the chance to speak to you. So.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me on, and no problem at all.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. If there's nothing else, yeah. Thanks again, Evan.
All right. See ya.
Okay. Thanks. Have a good night.
Bye.